In this video, we'll discuss the story that occurred in Pennsylvania, U.S. in 2014. When 33-year-old Jessica Paget left work to send a fax and never returned, her family filed a missing persons report. CCTV footage helped to solve this case. What happened to the woman was so shocking that the jury refused to watch the video evidence presented by the prosecutor at the trial. Jessica was born on December 15, 1980. The woman has spent her entire life in Pennsylvania. She was a very energetic and cheerful child. Her parents, Thomas and Danelle, divorced when she was still a child. Soon, her mother married another man, and Jessica considered him her second father. After graduating from high school in 1998, she went to college to study preschool education. While studying in college, Jessica met a guy named Michael Paget. They started dating and then living together. During the 8 years of their relationship, the couple had 2 children. However, they decided to marry each other only in August 2014. Some sources also claim they had another child, Michael's son from a previous relationship. Michael was a caring father and husband, but like in any other family, there were ups and downs in the couple's relationship. Still, Jessica was happy with Michael. And then, just 4 months after the wedding, she disappeared. For 2 years, she worked at a kindergarten in Northampton. She liked this job because she loved children and knew how to find a common language with them quickly. This connection was mutual. The children liked Jessica and enjoyed spending time with her. On November 21, 2014, she took her older children to school and then went to work with her younger son. The latter went to the same kindergarten where Jessica worked. It was an ordinary day. Nothing foreshadowed trouble. At lunchtime, Jessica approached the administrator and asked to leave work for a while, as she needed to send a fax from the house of her mother and stepfather, who lived in a rural area near Northampton. The administrator allowed her to leave. Jessica went by car, leaving her son in kindergarten. She was supposed to be back within half an hour. However, an hour passed, and Jessica did not return. Worried, her colleagues started calling her, but she did not answer. An hour later, the kindergarten administrator contacted Michael and asked if he knew where Jessica might be, saying that she left work for a while but never returned. Michael said he was at work and did not know where his wife was. He also said he would try to contact her himself. Michael immediately started calling Jessica, but all his calls went to voicemail. It wasn't like Jessica because she never missed calls from her family. Michael decided to call his wife's mother, Danelle Bittner, who was in Florida, to ask if Jessica had contacted her. But Danelle had no contact with her daughter that day. Therefore, she immediately began to worry. She also knew that not answering the phone wasn't like Jessica. Danelle told Michael to call her husband and Jessica's stepfather, Greg, and talk to him. But as it turned out, Greg did not see or talk to Jessica that day. With each new minute, the relatives were getting more and more worried. After hundreds of unsuccessful attempts to contact her daughter, Danelle went to the airport and bought a ticket for the next flight to Pennsylvania. 4 hours after Jessica left work, Michael contacted the police and reported his wife missing. He said that Jessica would not have left the children under any circumstances of her own free will, and therefore, he was afraid that something terrible could have happened to her. The police immediately launched an investigation, sending Jessica's description to all stations in the nearest cities. Jessica was about 5 feet 4 inches tall and weighed 130 pounds. She had a footprint tattoo on her shoulder, brown hair, and hazel eyes. The last time someone saw her, she was wearing gray sweatpants and a black hoodie with the words "Duck, Duck, Goose" on the front and "Staff" on the back. They checked all local hospitals and morgues but found no one matching the description. Detectives were trying to find out where the mother of 3 children could have gone. They interviewed her colleagues, but everyone said that Jessica had no enemies. Both children and their parents loved her. They also mentioned that Jessica seemed okay when she left work at lunch. They didn't notice anything unusual in her behavior. 2 hours after Michael reported his wife missing, the police were able to track the signal from Jessica's phone. According to the data received, her phone was about 1 mile from the kindergarten where she worked. This data wasn't 100% accurate since there is always some error when determining a phone's location. Nevertheless, the police now knew the area where the signal was coming from. By the time they started searching it, it was already dark outside. In one of the parking lots, officers found a white Subaru Outback. It was Jessica's car. The car was empty and unlocked. Inside was her purse with documents and bank cards. The keys were in the ignition, and Jessica's phone was on the passenger seat close to her purse. There were no signs of a crime in the car at first glance. The police had to answer several questions. Where is Jessica? What forced her to abandon her car and valuables so close to the kindergarten where she worked? The police needed CCTV footage to answer these questions. The back wall of the store across the street had a CCTV camera. It captured the place where they found Jessica's car. The police went to the store and asked the manager to show them the recordings. While examining the footage, they saw Jessica driving into the parking lot shortly after 1 p.m., getting out of the car and standing at the driver's door for a while. After this, she left and never returned. The investigators were at a loss as to why Jessica left her documents, phone, and keys and disappeared. Could she have gone into hiding of her own free will? Leaving her car, Jessica walked between these two buildings towards another parking lot. After that, she disappeared because there were no cameras there. There was a small and old monitor in the store where the investigators watched the recording. Hence, they made a copy of the video to watch at the station on a modern and big screen. The Northampton Police Department was small, so they had to ask the Pennsylvania State Police to help organize the search. They distributed flyers with Jessica's image throughout Northampton and nearby cities, and through the media and social networks. Detectives from the state police began to restore the chronology of events preceding the disappearance of Jessica. The first thing they did was talk with the kindergarten staff one more time. After learning that Jessica left work to send a fax from her mother's house, the detectives went there, hoping to find answers to their questions. This house was about 4 miles from the kindergarten, meaning it was a 10-minute journey. Upon arrival, the detectives talked to Danelle and her husband Greg, from whom they learned that Jessica had keys to the house and she could come at any time. On the day of her disappearance, Danelle was in Florida, and Greg wasn't home either. Every sent fax appears in the device's usage history, but as it turned out, Greg's fax machine was faulty, so it was unclear whether Jessica was at her mother's house that day. Perhaps she decided to use another fax machine. However, it doesn't explain why she left her belongings in the car. Next, the detectives decided to talk to Jessica's husband, Michael. He said that on the day of his wife's disappearance, he was the first to leave the house. A friend picked him up, and they went to work together. They checked Michael's statement because it often happens that it is the husband who is involved in the disappearance or death of his wife. Meanwhile, they organized a search party. The media reported about Jessica's disappearance and asked everyone who had any information to contact the police. 2 days have passed since the woman's disappearance, and the police haven't had any new leads. To find out if Jessica had reached her mother's house, detectives started looking for surveillance cameras on her way. There was only one road leading to her mother's house. Next to this road, there was an Exxon gas station. It, of course, had surveillance cameras. If Jessica was going where she said she was going, she should have appeared on the recording from this camera. Watching the video, the detectives saw Jessica's car. She drove there around 12:56 p.m. It was only a few minutes from the gas station to her mother's house, and since the fax machine was not working there, she had to drive back soon. Looking through the recording to see if her car drove in the opposite direction, the officers saw something strange. Just 14 minutes later, the car reappeared in the footage. Her white car, going through the gas station at high speed, went in the direction where the police later found her car. And the way Jessica drove was peculiar. She could have driven straight, but instead, she turned towards the gas station and without stopping, drove onto the road on the other side. Next, she went to the city center, where she later left the car in the parking lot. The only logical explanation was that Jessica was in a hurry, and there was a red traffic light at the intersection. So she drove through the gas station, thereby ending up on another road where the light was green. After that, she left the car in the parking lot, where the police officer found it later. Looking through the footage of Jessica leaving her car, the investigators saw something they had not noticed before. Jessica's height was 5 feet and 4 inches, and her weight was 130 pounds. However, the person who exited the car was much taller and heavier. Knowing the height of Jessica's car, the experts determined that the person's height was from 5 feet and 11 inches to 6 feet and 3 inches. While examining the abandoned car, the police discovered that the driver's seat was as close to the steering wheel as possible. This position would make it uncomfortable for someone over 5 feet 11 inches tall to sit behind the wheel. However, the police found an explanation for this. After getting out of the car, the person bent down and, as the detectives believed, moved the seat as close to the steering wheel as possible, thereby trying to give the police reason to assume it was Jessica behind the wheel. But who was this tall person? As it turned out, Michael's height was around 6 feet. The police invited the man for questioning. He stated that he was not involved in the disappearance of his wife, whom, according to him, he loved very much. He, as before, claimed that he was at work when the kindergarten staff called him. Detectives interviewed Michael's colleagues and received a report on the geolocation of his phone on the day of Jessica's disappearance. He wasn't lying. Michael was at work when his wife disappeared, which meant it wasn't Michael on this recording. It was the 4th day since Jessica's disappearance. It's hard to imagine the stress her children had to experience. Their life wasn't the same. The search continued but did not bring any results. Rewatching the recording of someone getting out of Jessica's car, the investigators puzzled over who it was. Once again, the officers noticed something they hadn't before. A minute after the unknown person disappeared behind the building, a white SUV, presumably a Ford, left there. Jessica's stepfather, Greg, matched the height description and had the same car. The police asked Greg to come to the station for a few questions. The man was shocked that he became a suspect in the disappearance of his stepdaughter. According to him, he left his car for repair at one of the service centers, and that day, a neighbor brought him there so that he could pick up his Ford. After that, he went to the Exxon gas station to eat something. It was the same gas station that provided the police with the CCTV footage. However, Greg didn't know that. After watching the recording again, investigators saw him driving past the Exxon gas station 2 minutes after he left the parking lot. He didn't stop there to have lunch, and it turned out that Greg lied. But could the man Jessica called her father have been involved in her disappearance? After talking to the man's neighbor, the detectives discovered she did not drive him to the car service. It meant Greg's whole story was a lie. Putting all the facts together, the investigators concluded that Greg was at home when Jessica arrived to send the fax. Maybe something happened, and Greg drove Jessica's car to the parking lot in the city center. A group of police officers went to the man's house. Jessica's mother, Danelle, allowed the police to inspect the house. One of the officers immediately went to the fax machine and discovered that Greg had lied about it not working. Moreover, the device's usage history confirmed Jessica did send that fax. Therefore, she was in her parents' house on her disappearance day. A trash can in the basement contained napkins with traces of blood. Greg's home shoes, found in a dumpster on the street, also had dried blood on them. Danelle told the police that Greg had called the garbage company the day before and asked to pick up the trash. She hadn't given it much thought at the time. However, now she remembered that the trash can wasn't full yet. Most likely, that's how Greg got rid of the evidence, namely from the products and rags he used to clean the house. The police interrogated Greg again. They informed him they knew all his statements were false and that they found evidence in his house. They also mentioned they knew Jessica was in his house on the day of her disappearance. After that, the man started talking. Gregory Graff, or just Greg, told investigators that he came home on the afternoon of November 21st and found Jessica's car in the driveway and bloodstains on the carpet. According to him, she was already dead when he returned home. He said he panicked and was afraid to call the police because he knew no one would believe him. He drove Jessica's car to the parking lot in the city center and then returned home. According to Graff, Jessica owed someone money, and that was the reason she died. This story was another lie by Gregory Graff. Detectives discovered that the day before Jessica disappeared, Graff bought adult toys. They were tired of listening to Graff's nonsense, so they directly asked him where he had put his stepdaughter's body, saying that an autopsy would give answers to many questions. Realizing he got caught, Graff changed his testimony again. He said he was at home that day watching adult videos when Jessica arrived and asked if she could send a fax. She was using the computer, and Graff was standing behind her. According to him, he was aroused and desired his stepdaughter. Without saying a word, he pulled out a gun and shot her in the back of the head. Then he moved Jessica's body to the bedroom and drove her car to a parking lot in the city center. His Ford was standing near the car service, where he had left it earlier for minor repairs. That's why he went there. After getting out of Jessica's car, he moved the seat so everyone would think she was behind the wheel. His following words shocked the investigators. When he returned home, he turned on the video camera and placed it near the bed. Then, it'll be a strange phrase, but you'll understand what I mean, he shot a video of his contact with his stepdaughter. As you know, Jessica was already dead. The police later found this video on Greg's computer. Then, according to him, he wrapped her body in a blanket and hid it in a ravine near his own house, after which he returned home and began cleaning. Graff said in the interview he wished he could get help. "I'm not really a bad guy," Graff told Pennsylvania State Police Corporal Jeffrey Smith. "I just lost my mind." After the confession, he talked about how his world changed after the crime. "I lost everything," Graff said. "My business, my home in Florida, my dogs, my wife." Then he mentioned his family and parents, but he never once said anything about the loss of Jessica. Thus, Danelle simultaneously found out that her daughter was dead and that her husband was the one who did it. But what Greg had done to the body was beyond the woman's imagination. After the arrest of Graff, the authorities issued an official statement. "Unfortunately, we have sad news to announce today. Jessica Paget is deceased. She is the victim of a homicide," Northampton County District Attorney John Morganelli said. "We still are a little bit hesitant to buy into the version of events that were given to us by the defendant, but we have reason to believe there was a sexual motive into this whole matter, unfortunately," he said. According to Morganelli, the prosecutor's office examined all the evidence to determine whether Graff planned the attack. Through a statement released by Pennsylvania State Police, the Pagets thanked law enforcement, the media, and the public for their efforts. "We are devastated by the loss of Jessica. She was a beautiful, vibrant young woman who was beloved by her family and friends. The world shines less bright today," the statement read. They charged 53-year-old Gregory Graff with taking the life of Jessica Paget. At the stage of the investigation, some suggested that when Jessica arrived, Greg tried to persuade her into intimacy, but when she rejected him, he was afraid of exposure and took her life. But there was no way to prove it since Jessica had no defensive wounds on her body. She died from a single wound to the back of the head, which confirmed Greg's testimony. According to the laws of the state of Pennsylvania, the man could face the death penalty. However, since Jessica was dead when he committed the second part of his heinous crime, the prosecutor's office had no right to demand the death penalty for him. After examining Greg and Jessica's computers and phones, The police did not find any hints that there was a connection between them that went beyond the relationship between stepfather and stepdaughter. The trial began in 2015. District Attorney John Morganelli said Philadelphia lawyer John McMahon Jr. never filed the results of any mental health evaluation for Gregory Graff. McMahon said he had Graff evaluated for a possible insanity defense, but Graff did not have a diminished mental capacity, so McMahon didn't use the evaluation at trial. Danelle Bittner said she found out about her daughter's disappearance on November 21st when she was in Florida, choosing carpets for her new home. When Graff picked her up at Lehigh Valley International Airport on November 22nd, he said, "It would be okay. They'd find her." At one of the court sessions, the jury had to watch a 6-minute video of Greg's heinous crimes. He used adult toys that he had bought the day before. The jury didn't want to watch the video, but the judge said they were obligated to do so before reaching a decision. Graff's lawyer tried to prove it wasn't a planned crime and that his client committed a crime of the 3rd degree, not the 1st. Therefore, Northampton County District Attorney John Morganelli made the difficult decision to show the jury a 6-minute video recording filmed by Graff. Morganelli said Graff pleaded not guilty to both charges. It left him no choice but to present all the evidence in his arsenal to convince jurors the crime was premeditated. "The Commonwealth needed to show you what he did," Morganelli said in his closing argument. "It wasn't pleasant, it wasn't tasteful, but we needed to show you what he did." "One good thing about criminals is they're not rocket scientists," Morganelli said. "They make mistakes." It took the jury just 6 minutes to reach a unanimous decision. They found Gregory Graff guilty of taking Jessica's life and abusing her body. The court sentenced him to life imprisonment without parole. Asked by the judge if he had anything to say, Graff said, "No, sir, I'm just very sorry." After sentencing, the judge recommended that the jury seek counseling from a psychologist. After the verdict, Jessica Paget's husband, Michael, said it's been tough moving on without the only woman he ever loved and raising 3 children without her. "She was the most wonderful person you'd ever meet," he told reporters. Danelle filed for divorce. However, there were difficulties, and she had to go to court. 55-year-old Gregory Graff, who appeared in court through a video feed from his Pennsylvania prison cell, refused to sign documents giving him 25% of his shared assets with Danelle Bittner. In this video, we'll discuss the story occurring in England in 2011. 17-year-old Emily Longley was full of hope and had a bright future awaiting her, but unfortunately, all her plans collapsed. This case caused a great resonance not only because of the death of a young woman, but also because of how events unfolded after her death. Emily Longley was born in England in 1994 to Mark and Caroline Longley. 2 years later, her parents had another child, Emily's younger sister Hannah. From early childhood, the girls were very close to each other. They lived in a loving and caring family. When Emily was 9 and Hannah was 7, the family moved to New Zealand. Auckland became their new home. When Emily fell in with the wrong crowd after emigrating to New Zealand, her middle-class parents sent her back to the UK to start a new life with her grandparents. In 2010, Emily flew to England to study at Brockenhurst College. She wanted to get a business degree and dreamed of becoming a model. In England, she lived at her grandparents' house in Bournemouth. Bournemouth, adjacent to Poole in the west, is a town in the county of Dorset, a popular resort on the English Channel coast. When Emily moved to England, her sister Hannah was still at school, and her parents, Mark and Caroline, divorced but maintained a friendly relationship. Emily was a beautiful young woman who attracted much attention. One day, she met 20-year-old Elliot Turner. He made quite an impression on her. Gradually, their communication grew into a romantic relationship. In April 2011, Emily returned to New Zealand to visit her family, whom she had not seen for about 6 months. Her father met her at the airport. She ran up to him and hugged him tightly, saying she missed him very much. Emily had a very close relationship with her father, who loved her madly and missed her smile, laughter, and dirty jokes. The following day, the whole family went to Emily's favorite pizzeria. She told her parents that, apart from studying in college, she was engaged in modeling and made some incredible friends. She also mentioned the man she was dating, 20-year-old Elliot Turner. They had only been dating for a few months, and it seemed to her that she was too young for something serious. "I think I'm going to end it when I go back," she said. Emily spent the next few weeks hanging out with friends and family. She had a wonderful time. No one suspected they would soon lose her. When Emily's flight started boarding, it was hard for her to say goodbye to her family. However, Emily promised she would be back in 5 months. She wanted to see the matches of the Rugby World Cup, which was to begin on September 9th. While texting with her father a few days later, Emily informed him about breaking up with Elliot, but she did not go into details. Elliot behaved strangely after seeing the photos of Emily that she posted on social networks while in New Zealand. There were guys in these photos, and Elliot was very jealous. The son of a wealthy jeweler, Elliot Turner, was 20 years old, and his life seemed carefree. Turner was well known in the local bar and club scene in the Bournemouth and Poole areas and was part of a gang of wealthy young men called The Firm. Called by his friends All Talk Turner because of his boasting, he met Emily in December 2010. The couple enjoyed the high life at the resort and often had fun until late at night, but Turner, who had a history of obsession with women, soon showed signs of jealousy. As a result, their relationship quickly escalated into violent arguments. Some people described him as a person displaying a threatening, aggressive, violent, controlling, and possessive nature. In January 2008, when he was 16, he received a harassment warning letter from the police telling him not to contact his ex-girlfriend after he bombarded her with text messages and emails because she broke up with him. Turner loved being at the center of attention. He didn't need to work for a living. His parents gave him everything he needed. Elliot skillfully manipulated people, including his parents. His life was all about parties, women, alcohol, and illegal substances. He considered himself a man who can do anything he wants. Elliot carried a hammer with him in case anyone tried to contradict him. His friends believed that Turner fancied himself a gangster and wanted to become the one everyone turned to for help. He could come to the bar and buy everyone a drink. Elliot bragged about driving a new Mini Cooper, but it was a gift from his grandmother. He tried to maintain his bad boy image with a series of supposedly streetwise messages on social networking sites where he often referred to himself as Scarface or God. He didn't lack female attention, but when he met Emily, he became very attached to her. She complimented his image of a successful person, which he worked hard to create. As their relationship developed, Turner started showing his controlling behavior more and more often. He even threatened Emily that he would take her life. In an emotional plea to Turner, Emily wrote a note to him a few months before her death saying, 1. I love you. 2. Don't say you'll kill me. 3. Stop talking about your ex-girlfriends. 4. Stop being so constantly aggressive. Be more cool, because that is so much more hot and you make me scared because you're so intimidating. When Turner began to show his true face, and when his controlling behavior started to go beyond all reasonable limits, Emily realized that he was not the person she wanted to be with. However, people like Turner don't understand rejection. On the evening of May 6, 2011, Emily was with friends in one of the entertainment venues. Surveillance cameras captured how she came to a nightclub with her friends. That evening, Turner read her Facebook messages and discovered that Emily was dating another man. It pissed him off. He came to the club and started arguing with Emily. This whole story ended with the girl throwing her drink in his face. Turner verbally abused her and threatened her with violence. He didn't like Emily's outfit. He thought it was too revealing. He dismissed the fact that Emily had broken up with him. The man wasn't going to let her go. Elliot ruined her evening, so she decided to leave. Yet, her ex-boyfriend followed her. His friends heard him say, I will kill her. I will go to prison for it and still be a millionaire. I would do 10 years. It wouldn't bother me. Turner caught up with Emily, somehow persuading her to go to his house. He said he wanted to talk in a more relaxed atmosphere. Elliot Turner lived with his parents. Perhaps that's why Emily went with him. Maybe she thought he would behave more calmly in the presence of his parents. Neighbors saw them go inside the house. The following morning, Anita Turner, Elliot's mother, called the emergency service, saying Emily was not waking up.
Just tell me what's happened there, the main reason for the call.
What it is, my son's friend is staying with us. This morning, I tried to wake both of them up, but the girl didn't wake up. We tried to wake her up. I don't know what it is.
I need you to pull back the duvet for me and just look to see if you can see any signs of breathing.
I tried to hold the pulse.
No, I need you to put your face next to her mouth. Can you feel any breath? Can you see her chest going up and down?
No.
Nothing. What colour is she?
What colour is she?
Yeah, what colour is she? She's blue. Is she red?
Is she red? My husband is having a look now. Hang on.
It was about 9 a.m. Before the arrival of the ambulance, Anita listened to the operator's instructions on how to help Emily. Unfortunately, when the ambulance arrived, the only thing they could do was to state the death of Emily Longley. Anita was an Indonesian citizen who came to the UK to marry Lee Turner. When the couple had a son, they did not deny him anything, which was a big mistake. During her conversation with the emergency service operator, Anita's voice did not sound like the voice of a mother who had just found her son's girlfriend dead. She was too calm, as if nothing unusual had happened. Thousands of miles from England, in New Zealand, Emily's father, Mark, woke up at 2 a.m. and saw a bunch of missed calls from his ex-wife Caroline and younger daughter Hannah. There was also a voice message from Hannah, but Mark could barely make out what she was saying. Then he heard Caroline scream in the background and her words, "Emily is dead." Mark refused to believe it. He called his mother in England. When she answered, his whole world fell apart. His mother was crying hysterically. Moments later, one of the police officers took her phone. "I'm sorry to tell you that your daughter Emily is dead," he said. Mark couldn't believe it. After all, Emily was sitting on his couch and smiling just a week ago. Flying to the UK, the grief-stricken father still refused to believe that his daughter was dead. But unfortunately, it wasn't a dream. The loss of the eldest daughter was a heartbreaking challenge for Emily's parents. The police told them that Emily had died in her sleep. It didn't make any sense. She was young and healthy. The police collected some evidence, but it was unclear what happened to Emily. They had to wait for the autopsy results. Elliot Turner's parents, Anita and Lee, told investigators they had been home all night and had not heard anything suspicious. Elliot publicly mourned Emily by posting photos of them together on his Facebook page. The police had nothing bulletproof to refute the story of Turner and his parents that Emily mysteriously died in her sleep. During the investigation of any death, the main factor is to determine the cause of it. When investigators discover the cause of the victim's death, they understand what they are dealing with and how to conduct an investigation. While waiting for the autopsy results, the investigators found out that a few days before her death, Emily had posted something strange on her Facebook page. "I have a stalker," she added. "Someone just called me and I was like, 'Who's this?' And they were like, 'You don't know me, but I know everything about you.' And I was like, 'How did you get my number?' And he was like, 'I'll tell you when I see you,' and kept asking me out. So I hung up and they won't stop calling," Emily wrote on Thursday, May 5th. At the same time, the police managed to find out that before her death, Emily quarreled with Elliot Turner in front of other nightclub guests. After interviewing Turner's friends, investigators learned that he tried to control Emily's every move, that he found out about her meeting with another man, and most importantly, that Elliot threatened to take her life many times. But his friends did not attach any importance to this, believing that these were just words with which Turner strengthened his image of a gangster. The autopsy did not give an exact cause of Emily's death. However, experts mentioned it could be strangulation, and one of them said, "The physical findings are entirely consistent with pressure being applied to the neck." Investigators believed that one of the Turner family members could be involved in Emily's death, so they decided to install listening devices in their house. The police were hoping to find out if they were hiding anything, and they were right to do that.
We were right to destroy them. You think we were right to destroy them?
Yeah.
Because we've perverted the course of justice. We've destroyed vital evidence in this case. You think we were right?
Yeah.
Yeah, Mum, but focus the conversation because it looks. You look so guilty. You look so guilty by ringing the father.
No, I didn't.
But Mum, please, from a policeman's point of view, it's so obvious. That girl is. Well, I've been meeting that girl has ruined my life.
Yeah.
She has ruined my life.
She did ruin your life.
I would have known she was freezing, Mum. You can't be. You gotta think. Brain. Just thought she was, I don't know, I thought she was just knackered. Just really tired. This has happened before when I can't get her out of bed. Hence officer, I made a cup of tea. First, because I thought she was okay. Mum, that's fine, it's so believable.
It's burning me inside. Every second of the day it's burning. But I know something that they don't know. It's burning me. Eating me up. I just grabbed it and I grabbed it as hard as I could and I grabbed it like that. Crush like.
They heard Elliot instructing his mother on how to behave with the police and what she needed to say. His father, Lee Turner, seemed to be the only person who understood what he was doing was wrong, but eventually he submitted to the will of his son and wife. While listening to the recordings, investigators also heard what happened to Emily Longley. Elliot Turner admitted that he caused her death. They arrested Elliot Turner a week after Emily's death. He, of course, denied his guilt. His lawyers tried to challenge the authenticity of those audio recordings. However, having studied all aspects of this case, the judge allowed the prosecution to use the recordings as evidence. Not knowing the police were listening, Elliot admitted that he felt angry every day and that no one had ever pissed him off as much as Emily. During the trial in May 2012, his lawyer stated that their client acted in self-defense. Elliot Turner said that the quarrel in his bedroom turned violent and he had to grab Emily by the neck. He said he didn't strangle her. He just found her dead in his bed the next morning. During the second day of the trial, Turner told the court that he was disgusted by his actions that night. Allegedly, after finding Emily dead, he wrote a letter to his mother saying how ashamed he was and that he was leaving for Spain. One can assume Elliot Turner was going to leave the country on the day of Emily's death, but changed his mind for some reason. When the police arrived at Turner's home after the 999 call, they saw packed bags. Elliot's passport was in his pocket. He admitted in court that he had threatened Emily and felt upset and deceived the night before her death after seeing false emails on her phone saying he had smashed her face into a table. When describing the fight they had before her death, he mentioned Emily started beating him with her hands and feet. He tried to calm her down before giving up and throwing her a 20-pound note for a cab. He said, "She just ignored me at first. Then, 5 seconds later, she just went crazy." I had never seen Emily get to that point of rage. I didn't know what to do. She would not stop. I kept repeating myself, "Stop it, calm down." At that point, I grabbed her by the neck using my right hand. Defense counsel Anthony Dunn asked, "Why did you do that?" Turner replied, "To stop her going nuts. I did not know what to do." My right hand made contact with her neck. When the defense counsel asked how hard he grabbed her, Turner replied, "I would not say very hard, but it was quite hard. I grabbed her and pushed her down onto the bed. I pressed down on her neck when she was in the lying down position." He said he held her there for 5 or 6 seconds, then let go and stormed out of the room. When asked if he intended to kill Emily, Turner replied, "No." He said he thought Emily had gone to sleep. Allegedly, he realized Emily was dead only when she did not wake up the following morning. In an interview with the Herald newspaper, Emily's father, Mark, spoke about how hard it was for him to lose his daughter. Here is the thing about death: it sucks. It doesn't matter if it is your child, your partner, or your 99-year-old grandmother. It sucks. That a person is there one day and not the next, well, it is not something we can deal with easily. All anniversaries are hard. Birthdays are hard. Christmas is hard. Easter is also tough because it was the last time I really spent time with her, Mark Longley said. He said the heaviest part was that he would never see the woman she could have become. I miss seeing the life she was denied unfold. We had a brief glimpse of the woman she was becoming, and I was so proud of her. I am her father, and of course am biased, but the world really was a better place with her in it. It was certainly a lot more fun. At the trial, they portrayed Elliot Turner as a spoiled, wealthy kid whose parents wanted to help him escape punishment. The court heard he was given the run of the family's home in the affluent Queen's Park area of Bournemouth, where he would hold parties for his middle-class friends. Described as wild by his father Lee, he was given his own living space in the converted garage of his parents' house so he could come and go without disturbing them. It was in his room, which had its own mini bar, that he strangled Emily on his bed. The police examined the computers seized from Turner's and found the following search queries: death by strangulation and how to avoid punishment for a crime. The main motive of the crime was jealousy. The court heard testimony from Luke Ashford, who spent the night with Emily. As already mentioned, Elliot Turner found out about it. Even while in custody, Turner boasted that the jury would believe his twisted story that Emily had attacked him and he had acted in self-defense when he strangled her in a fit of jealousy. In letters from his prison cell to his friends, he said he would soon drive a new Range Rover and move to Spain. He planned to sell the rights to his story and live a fashionable life. However, the jury quickly shattered his illusions when they found him guilty. On May 22, 2012, the court sentenced Elliot Turner to life in prison with a minimum term of 16 years. Announcing the verdict, Mrs. Justice Dobbs described Turner as a man of striking arrogance. She said, "Emily was a lovely, kind, fun-loving girl who brought a ray of sunshine to those she touched. That light has been extinguished suddenly and needlessly by you. You did not love her, she was just a trophy. The relationship, if it can be called that, was all about you. It was about control. Control you carried out using aggression and threats. You can put away thoughts of champagne, Bentleys, and girls, and concentrate on the reason you are serving a life sentence." Mrs. Justice Dobbs also sentenced Turner to 9 months to run concurrently for perverting the course of justice. But Elliot Turner wasn't the only person on trial. His parents, Anita and Lee, whom Turner used for cash to fund his lavish partying, loved their son so much they tried to cover his crime. Lee destroyed Turner's confession letter, and Anita took the jacket from the bedroom where the letter allegedly was. His mother even postponed calling an ambulance so her son could cover his tracks and let the family come up with a convincing story for the police. When asked why she did not call an ambulance, Anita Turner replied that she did not believe Emily was dead. Under cross-examination, they asked her if she thought Emily had ruined her son's life. After a pause of 6 seconds, she replied, "No." In the recording, Lee asked Anita whether they had done the right thing. "We've done the right thing," Anita replied. Both 51-year-old Anita Turner and 54-year-old Lee Turner were found guilty of perverting the course of justice and sentenced to 27 months in prison. Mrs. Justice Linda Dobbs said, "The two of you chose to fight the case showing little remorse. Mr. Turner, you claimed you didn't know the contents of the letter when you destroyed it, but the fact it was burning on your conscience is quite evident from your anguished tone of voice on the tape." Released in 2013 after serving half of their sentence, they still live in the house where Emily Longley died. Emily's dad, Mark, broke down as he spoke about the verdicts after the case. Supported by former wife Caroline and daughter Hannah, he said, What we have heard over these 5 weeks has shocked us and disgusted us. That a man so evil like Turner could treat a gentle and loving girl like Emily so violently is beyond belief. We are so proud of the fact that she had come halfway around the world to cause a better life for herself. This is a life Turner decided to end. Mark said there was a lot of talk about Turner's boasting and that no one had taken his threats seriously until it was too late. He added, even his mother did not take him seriously when he texted her to tell her he was going to break Emily's neck. Perhaps if someone had taken his threats seriously, Emily might be with us today. I hope Turner suffers every day in prison for what he has done. In October 2020, the press reported that Elliot Turner's cellmates had beaten him in prison. It happened after he hung up photos of Emily in his cell and boasted of receiving letters from female fans. Some of his cellmates attacked him after he said he would soon return to his life full of champagne, Bentleys, and birds. In 5 years, Turner will have the right to apply for early release from prison. One can only hope that common sense will prevail and that the parole board will make the right decision regarding a person who still has no remorse for his actions. In this video, we'll delve into the story that occurred in England. On Christmas Eve 2022, 26-year-old Ellie Edwards was with her friends at the Lighthouse pub at Wallasey Village on the Wirral. Instead of a Christmas miracle, Ellie had to face real evil. Unfortunately, that evening was the last in the beautiful young woman's life.
Ellie Edwards.
Ellie Edwards.
Ellie Edwards.
Ellie Edwards.
Or Ellie Mae.
In 2019, Ellie Edwards was 26 years old. She worked as a cosmetologist at the Nova Studio Beauty Salon and was a dental nurse. Her colleagues and numerous clients loved her. Here's how Tim Edwards, Ellie's father, described her. How can I put across how she was to people who didn't know her? Great, beautiful, kind, giving, always looking out for people, especially her family, bubbly, always had a laugh. She set her own goals and was achieving them, and she did it with a smile on her face. On the evening of December 24th, 2022, Ellie and her sister, who flew from Dubai to spend Christmas and New Year with her family, went to the Lighthouse pub. She was supposed to meet her friends there. Surveillance cameras captured how Ellie spent that evening. She was in a good mood, hugging her friends and smiling. They danced, sang, and had a good time, but someone who considered themselves above all decided to ruin this evening. Someone for whom human life meant nothing. Police received several reports of a shooting just after 11:50 p.m. Soon, the police officers cordoned off the area. Someone had fired at least 12 shots at the guests of the pub where Ellie was meeting with friends. Detective Superintendent Sue Coombs told a news conference on Christmas Day. Tragically, the victim, a 26-year-old woman, had suffered a serious gunshot injury to her head. She was taken to Arrow Park Hospital, but sadly passed away shortly afterwards. Her family have been informed, and on today, which should be a day with friends celebrating, they are coming to terms with this tragic loss. It's very early stages of the investigation, but we do not believe that the victim in this case has been targeted. She was out enjoying Christmas with her sister and friends at what should have been a peaceful time. What her family are now going through is incomprehensible. Witnesses described how a gunman fired shots into the front entrance of the pub and fled in a dark vehicle. The victim of the shooting was Ellie Edwards. The police didn't believe Ellie was the target of the attack, in which 4 men also received injuries. A 28-year-old man from nearby Beechwood was treated for severe injuries, while those sustained by the other men, aged 22, 24, and 33, were not life-threatening. Ellie's tragic death was an unimaginable, heartbreaking challenge for her family. It was early Christmas morning when Tim Edwards woke up and heard the worst news a parent could ever hear. It just didn't make sense for Tim. After all, he was talking to his daughter a few hours ago. They discussed the meeting and planned to wrap Christmas presents together. Now, the grief-stricken father wanted answers, trying to figure out how to live on. Meanwhile, the police were doing everything to find and bring the criminal to justice. They needed CCTV footage and witnesses who could share important information. In a post to Facebook, Merseyside Police's Detective Superintendent David McCaughrean stated, "We have a number of officers at Wallasey Village who are carrying out extensive inquiries to understand exactly what has taken place and take immediate action. I would ask anyone who was in the lighthouse in Wallasey Village last night who witnessed the incident or has mobile or CCTV footage of what happened to contact us as a matter of urgency, as they may have information that is vital to our investigation. We believe that the gunman left the pub car park in a dark-colored vehicle, possibly a dark-colored Mercedes, shortly after the shooting, and we are keen to hear from anyone who saw this to contact us immediately." The police knew that the criminal left the scene in a dark Mercedes. They discovered this information after viewing the CCTV footage. You can see the Mercedes pulling into the parking lot next to the pub where Ellie was with friends. The driver parks the car so that he can see who is inside the establishment and can leave as quickly as possible. The man watched everyone for a while. Then, getting out of the car, he approached from the side to stay invisible. Moments later, he fired 12 shots, ran up to his Mercedes, and immediately left the crime scene. Thus, the police had to answer a few questions. Who was this man? Who was the target of the attack? What was the motive? They started patrolling the streets in the area where the shooting occurred. Officers went from one door to the other and interviewed residents. 2 days later, the police announced the arrest of 2 suspects without disclosing their names. They were a 30-year-old man and a 19-year-old woman who were later released. According to the authorities' statement, the arrested man was not the person who fired the shots. Here's what police spokesman Con Critchley said: "We will not rest until we bring the offenders to justice, and by that, I mean the person who pulled the trigger of the gun in the most indiscriminate way. Anybody who was responsible for arranging, facilitating, or harboring this individual, and anybody who continues to withhold information on who has done this, or indeed where the weapon is. We will be tireless in our approach to find justice for Ellie and her family." There were reports that the shooting was the result of a feud between 2 local rival gangs. It confirmed that Ellie was a random victim. Asked if he could directly link the shooting to a feud between gangs in Wirral, Critchley said, "We have seen over a number of months some level of escalation here." The detectives determined that the targets of this attack were Jake Duffy and Kieran Salkeld, but we'll talk about them a little later. On December 29th, the police arrested a 3rd suspect in this case, but he was also not the person who fired shots at the guests of the Lighthouse pub. The man, whose name stayed announced, was charged with conspiracy to commit a crime. The police also managed to find a dark Mercedes the criminal used to flee the crime scene, but there were some problems with the car. Let's look at the CCTV footage taken on the evening of December 31st, a week after Ellie's death. The bright flashing light that you see now is fire. The criminal knew that the police were already a few steps away from catching him, and therefore burned the Mercedes to destroy possible evidence that the police would find there during a search. The Mercedes has become a pile of burnt metal, but the police managed to identify it. It turned out that the criminal stole this car, presumably to use it to commit a crime. Almost 2 weeks later, on January 11th, the police announced the arrest of 2 more suspects. They caught a 22-year-old man and a 23-year-old woman in Central Wales. The man's name was Connor Chapman, and he had an extensive criminal history. These 5 photos show him at different times. In a few years, Chapman turned from a petty criminal into the main suspect in the death of Ellie Edwards. Here are just some of the offenses for which the police arrested him before: aggravated carjacking, threatening behavior, burglary, disorderly conduct, and a high-speed chase, which ended with him hiding in the bushes and telling officers that he was waiting for his mate. Growing up on the Woodchurch estate in Birkenhead and mostly living with his grandparents, Chapman attended Woodchurch High School but left before sitting his exams. He first appeared in court back in 2014, when he was only about 14 years old, for shoplifting. In 2016, the young man appeared before the criminal justice system for being on an enclosed premises and driving a stolen car. Next, he violated the conditional discharge and was behind the wheel without a license and insurance. Then, in 2017, there was a car theft, illegal substance possession, and a violation of a criminal behavior order that banned him from visiting some parts of the Wirral. In 2018, the police again detained him for possession of a prohibited substance and carrying a cold weapon in a public place. During the same year, the general public heard Chapman's name when he first appeared on the pages of local newspapers after an unsuccessful attempt to escape from a police chase. The police noticed the stolen Audi and tried to stop the car, but the driver disobeyed. Chapman, who was 18 at the time, was driving at the speed of 60 miles per hour in a 30 miles per hour zone while trying to escape. He flew into the oncoming traffic and then crashed into the curb, which caused him to abandon the car and run away. When the police found him hiding in the nearby bushes, he said, "I'm waiting for my mate." Chapman's lawyer said, "He is influenced by older peers, and he has struggled with his own health problems, including ADHD and other medical prognoses." Chapman admitted dangerous driving, aggravated vehicle taking, driving while disqualified, and breaching a criminal behavior order. The court sentenced him to 8 months in a Young Offenders Institute and banned him from driving for 2 years and 4 months. Passing the sentence, recorder Mary Loram poignantly told him, "You have a bad record despite your young age, and you have been given every possible chance. You have no regard at all for other people, it strikes me. Other people with such a diagnosis do not behave in the way that you do. They do not cause a nuisance to members of the public in the way you do." By the age of 18, he had 14 convictions for 30 crimes. Therefore, one can assume that this man wasn't planning on changing his life for the better. Unfortunately, there were no legal grounds to isolate him from society for a long time. In January 2020, the court sentenced him to 10 months in prison for possession of stolen items and carrying a cold weapon in a public place. Records show that Merseyside police issued public appeals for information on his whereabouts when he was a wanted man on no less than 5 occasions. Chapman once stated he was in custody more than he was out. By the time Chapman turned 20, his record had increased to 19 convictions for 43 offenses. In the summer of 2022, he got out of prison. It was about 6 months before Ellie Edwards died. His first child was born while he was still in prison, and a second daughter was on the way. He told a jury that he wanted to start a new life and grow up, but these were just pretentious and meaningless words. It turned out that Chapman was a member of one of the local gangs. He engaged in the sale of illegal substances, robbed another house, and stole 2 electric motorcycles. But his most severe and devastating crime was yet to come. On December 24th, 2022, amid a dispute between organized crime groups based on the Woodchurch and Beechwood estates, Chapman armed himself with a Scorpion submachine gun. He spent 3 hours waiting for Kieran Salkeld and Jake Duffy, members of the rival gang, outside the Lighthouse pub in Wallasey. Shortly before midnight, Chapman fired 12 shots. Both Salkeld and Duffy were seriously injured but managed to survive. Unfortunately, when Chapman fired the gun, Ellie Edwards, who was spending the evening in the company of close friends, was next to Salkeld. 2 bullets hit her in the head. She didn't know Salkeld and Duffy. She just happened to be there during an attack on them. On January 25, 2023, family, friends, and hundreds of not indifferent people came to the funeral of Ellie Edwards. Locals lined the streets in the rain as mourners arrived for the service at 12:30 p.m. The funeral cortege was led by a hearse with a floral tribute saying, "Ellie." Ellie's coffin was brought in a carriage pulled by 4 white horses. It was carried into the church, with a floral display on top, by pallbearers including her heartbroken dad, Tim. A message from her grandfather, George, was delivered to mourners, encouraging them to leave the church with hope in our hearts. The Lighthouse Pub was closed that day as a sign of respect. A statement on the pub's Facebook page said, "Ellie and her family have remained very much in our thoughts over these past few weeks, and even more so right now. May she rest in peace." Tim said that he was hoping to start a foundation in his daughter's name to help reduce gun violence. He stated, "There's no winners with gun crime. If you pick up a gun, your future is over, and everybody else's future around you is over. It's dead simple. It's absolutely pointless and it solves nothing. I want to see a positive that comes out of this. Ellie's name will be used for good in the future. She can't be forgotten." Connor Chapman faced numerous charges, including causing the death of Ellie Edwards, but he also had an accomplice. The police charged 20-year-old Thomas Waring with possession of a prohibited weapon and assisting an offender. The detectives established that after shooting at the guests of the Lighthouse Pub, Chapman drove the stolen Mercedes to Barnston, Merseyside, where his longtime friend Waring lived. The surveillance camera located there filmed Chapman walking along the road and picking up the weapon of the crime after it fell to the ground. Although the police never found the crime weapon, they found Chapman's DNA in a mixed sample on a bullet casing found at the scene and on a red glove recovered from Waring's home, which matched one the gunman was wearing. A taxi Waring ordered under a fake name and with a vague pickup point took Chapman home to Woodchurch, Merseyside, around 5 a.m. on Christmas morning. The men then took steps to cover up their heinous crime by driving to a remote location on New Year's Eve, where they set a stolen Mercedes on fire. Thomas Waring was found guilty on all counts. In July 2023, the court sentenced him to 9 years in prison. Now, I will say a few words about the people who were the targets of the attack. Jake Duffy and Kieran Salkeld. They were both wounded, but survived. In this case, they were victims. But looking at their way of life, it becomes clear that they were on a dangerous path. They were members of the Beechwood Gang. On December 23, 2023, the day before Chapman injured them in the Lighthouse Pub, Duffy and Salkeld beat up another criminal associated with a group of which Connor Chapman was a member. While Chapman was awaiting sentencing in the shooting case, the two were already in jail for their crimes. Salkeld was sentenced to 27 months for assault and 9 months for affray to run concurrently, while Duffy was sentenced to 2 years for assault and 9 months for affray also to run concurrently. The court has also issued injunctions against them, a complete list of which you can see on your screen. Commenting on the injunctions, Chief Inspector Tom Welch said, "Gang-related activity has a profoundly detrimental effect on those who live or work in areas where these criminals carry out their business, often recklessly with complete disregard for others. The gang injunctions that have been served on Duffy and Salkeld are part of the ongoing and relentless work we are doing to combat serious and organized crime in Birkenhead. The prohibitions detailed in these injunctions are widely known by our local officers and will be policed rigorously. If either man commits a breach, we can act quickly to arrest them and put them back before the courts, which can result in prison sentences. We are using all the powers and legislation available to us to disrupt and deter gang-related activity, but we cannot do this alone and need communities to tell us about any criminal ongoings happening in their area so we can get criminals off our streets. Together, we are always stronger." But before the story of the shooting, The court banned Chapman from being in the area where the Lighthouse pub was, and yet he chose exactly this place to commit the crime that resulted in the death of the innocent young woman. Perhaps in many countries of the world, there should be stricter laws and more effective methods to influence people who pose a threat to society. This is my subjective opinion, but what you personally think about it, you can write in the comments. Connor Chapman denied everything. He said that the camera at the Lighthouse pub captured another man, not him. He claimed he was at home wrapping Christmas presents. However, the evidence suggested otherwise. During the 3.5-week trial, the jury heard about precursor events leading up to the incident, relating to a feud between Chapman's Woodchurch estate-based gang and a rival group based around the Beechwood estate, home to Salkeld and Duffy. Investigators found that after committing the crime, Chapman wanted to escape to Spain by car ferry. Before he could do that, the police searched his grandparents' house. The man knew that detectives were close to catching him. Therefore, he did not risk using a car ferry and decided to escape to Wales. That's where the plainclothes officers later arrested him. At the trial, Chapman admitted that he had access to the Mercedes you saw on CCTV footage, but stated that it was a car that he and other gang members used mainly to trade illegal substances. He said other people had access to the Mercedes, claiming he wasn't driving it that evening. He admitted that he burned the car, but stated that it happened after he realized someone from his gang used it in the shooting. Speaking outside court, Ellie's father, Tim, said he hoped his daughter's killer would never see Christmas again. "If I'm lucky enough to be around for a long time yet, I'll do my best to make sure he never comes out of jail," he said. The jury of 7 women and 5 men came to a unanimous decision. After 3 hours and 48 minutes of deliberation and 3.5 weeks of trial at Liverpool Crown Court, they found Chapman guilty. Passing sentence, Mr. Justice Goose told him, "What you did, Connor Chapman, was as wicked as it was shocking. You murdered Ellie Edwards, bringing an end to her young life. You spent the days afterwards removing or destroying evidence that would identify you as the gunman. It's utterly shocking you carefully planned a revenge attack in a gang rivalry. You had no thought for anyone else. The risks of what you did were as high as they were obvious." On July 7, 2023, the court sentenced Connor Chapman to life in prison with a minimum term of 48 years before he could request parole. During the verdict's announcement, Ellie's family let out sighs of relief, whispered yes, and her dad, Tim Edwards, punched the air. Answering journalists' questions, Tim said crucial words, "I think Ellie's legacy hopefully will be something that people draw a bit of positivity from. She was a caring person. She would give more of her time to other people than she did to herself. If she can be remembered for that and for her warmth and her young 26-year-old happy-go-lucky life that she was living. She wouldn't want you sitting around moping and going downhill. She wouldn't want that. She'd want you to live the best life you possibly can. That was the way she approached people or dealt with people. She'd lift your spirits. I was lucky enough to be her father, but we were also like best mates, so there's loads of good memories of laughter and stupid things that we did together, which you wouldn't be able to print."